Welcome to Tom's True Crime. Today we take you to Modesto, California. July 19th, 2017. The lazy afternoon is interrupted at around 2 p.m. when 40-year-old Pansy Burrowes makes a panicked 911 call. She asks dispatchers to send someone to the home of her boyfriend, Carlos Jerrivont. The dispatcher asked Pansy what happened. Pansy said, "I don't know. He's dead. He's been beaten to death." Dispatcher asked Pansy if she was inside the house. Pansy said, "No, I had to ask my mom to come get me." Pansy explains she and her mom are parked at an intersection about 11 miles away from Carlos's home. Deputies went to Carlos Jerrivont's house. It's a trailer that sits on a small lot. There was a short hallway that opened up into the master bedroom. There, they saw the body. It was very clear that there was some type of blunt force object used because his whole side of his face was bashed in. There was a large amount of blood spatter all over the headboard and the walls. Carlos Jerrivont was lying in the middle of the bed with his feet hanging off the bottom. Deputies confirmed Carlos was deceased. They immediately made sure there was nobody else on the property and waited for crime scene investigators to arrive. As the crime scene investigation gets underway, a deputy meets Pansy and her mother at their car. Pansy's demeanor was all over the place. She was crying. She was visibly upset. Pansy said to the deputy, "I had never seen a dead person before, and I was just freaked out." The deputy asks Pansy why she didn't call 911 from Carlos's home. Pansy had active warrants, and that's why Pansy didn't want to call the police. She had 2 outstanding warrants for failure to appear. Pansy said, "I should have called 911 right there, but I wasn't thinking. I was scared. I wanted my mom. My mom was on the road, so she picked me up. I was crying, and we stopped on the side of the road and called 911. Pansy recounts to the deputy what she saw inside Carlos's trailer. "I tried to go in the door. The door was locked. We always had windows we could get in because sometimes I would get locked out or he would get locked out. So I go to the kitchen window. I went in the house and I saw him lying in the bed. I saw blood on him, and then I said, 'Wake up.' I was shaking him. 'Wake up.' I started getting louder and louder. I shook him, and he wouldn't wake up. I can't believe it." And I was in shock. To find the killer, investigators will have to unravel a web of lies, rumor, and hearsay. Born on September 21st, 1967, Carlos Jerrivont was close with his family. Katie and Tony were good parents, and his brother Theo, they were all really close. Soon after high school, Carlos met Jessimin Shedle. Jessimin was working at a gas station in Modesto, and Carlos used to come in all the time and flirt. The flirtation quickly led to more. One day, Jessimin and Carlos were just sitting there talking, and he just leaned over, and he said to Jessimin, "I love you." Jessimin said, "I love you too." Carlos asked Jessimin to marry him. Jessimin said yes. They married on April 16th, 1988. Carlos Jerrivont's dad gave them an acre of land. That was their wedding present, and that's where they put their first home. September 1st, 1988, Cassiana Jerrivont came along, Jessimin and Carlos's oldest daughter. They were very happy. And then a year later, Piper came in February. Carlos Jerrivont's lifelong dream was to be a mechanic. He got his qualifications and he was very happy. Family is very important to Carlos. He was home every night. After nearly 2 decades together, the couple amicably divorced in 2003. Jessimin and Carlos had a good relationship, but there were 3 people in their marriage bed. There was Jessimin, there was Carlos, and there was his mother. His mom always meddled, and Jessimin just got tired of it. His mother won, and Jessimin moved on. But the divorce wouldn't be the biggest challenge Jessimin and Carlos would face. Jessimin and Carlos ended up losing both of their daughters on June 19, 2006. Car wreck. Cassiana, her boyfriend, and her younger sister Piper were out cruising. The boyfriend was driving at a high rate of speed. Carlos and Jessimin didn't know they were gone until they got to the hospital. It was very hard on the family. It was just horrible. Carlos was devastated. After that, Carlos Jerrivont got with a bad crowd, and he started doing drugs. He just changed. He wasn't the same Carlos anymore. In 2014, Carlos met Pansy Burrowes, who was a salve for his hurting heart. She's a little shy, but bubbly and energetic. She was always really nice to people. Born in 1976, Pansy and her three siblings were raised by her mom and stepfather. Her mom worked at a diner, and her dad sold insurance. Pansy and her mom have always been really close. Her mom is her best friend, and she loves her mom. Pansy enjoyed a carefree childhood until she got pregnant as a high school freshman. Pansy and the baby's father got married and moved to Florida. Pansy was really excited when her oldest daughter was born. Then more children. Her son was born in 93. The last daughter was born in 95. At that time, Pansy was introduced to weed and cocaine and meth. When her children were 8, 11, and 12, they were put into foster care. And then they got adopted. It was a horrible marriage. Her husband filed for divorce finally, and Pansy signed the papers. Looking for a fresh start, Pansy headed back to California. She was really happy to move back and be around her family. She moved in with her mom. She started working at Walmart where her mom worked. But 37-year-old Pansy was lonely. She met 46-year-old Carlos Jerrivont in 2014 on Facebook. On the night they met on Facebook, Carlos went to Pansy's house and picked her up. They went to Carlos's house that night and talked. Carlos told Pansy that he had had a hard time and had a hard life. His two daughters got killed in a bad car accident. Pansy ended up staying at Carlos's house for a couple of days, and she just never left. Pansy felt Carlos was a good guy. She liked everything about him. Pansy moved in, and the couple looked to bury their pain in a good time. The place they were at was just a big party house. There were drugs and having fun. But after 3 years, they were ready for a change. Pansy and Carlos just broke down and said, "We couldn't do this anymore." They were living the wrong kind of life with all the drugs and everything else. On July 19, 2017, their dream of a sober future ends in bloodshed. The deputy continues to speak with Pansy after she discovered Carlos's battered body. He was lying in bed like he had been sleeping, and somebody come in and beat him to death. Pansy, at that point, was taken to the sheriff's department. At Carlos's trailer, homicide investigators continue searching for clues. They found Carlos's wallet. It was partially opened, laying on top of a trash bag. There was no money in the wallet. Somebody either was stealing his money, or there was something out of his wallet that they wanted. Maybe they made it look like it's a robbery gone wrong. July 19, 2017, investigators in Modesto, California, continue processing the home of 49-year-old Carlos Jerrivont, who was found beaten to death in his bedroom. No murder weapon was located. Investigators knew that it was a blunt force object. There was a pool of blood in one location on the mattress. But Carlos Jerrivont's body was in a different location. There was also a bloody blanket on the floor, and a bloody pillow on the floor. It almost appeared as if somebody had attempted to take the body out of the trailer, but realized that it was way too difficult. Though the attacker did not remove Carlos's body, they did take the contents of his wallet. Investigators consider whether robbery was the motive or an afterthought. A robbery gone wrong wasn't necessarily ruled out, but different pieces of that particular puzzle just didn't add up. The TV was there. Investigators don't believe there was a lot in the residence that someone would have broken in and stole. Investigators head back to the sheriff's office to speak with Carlos's girlfriend, Pansy Burrowes. She says she and Carlos were trying to get clean and build a future together. According to Pansy, Carlos had asked her to marry him. She said yes, but because of the drugs and the life they were living, it just wasn't happening. Investigator asked Pansy who she spent the night with last night. Pansy said with Carlos. There was a party. It was determined that there was a so-called party there the night before, with maybe 8 individuals that were at that party. People kept showing up. There were people in and out. Pansy said the people at the party, they were all gone by midnight. The only one there passed that was Pansy. Pansy says she stayed the night at Carlos's and left around 8 a.m. to go to her friend Dimitri Heathcote's house. Carlos lived about a mile or so away from Dimitri Heathcote's residence. Carlos and Dimitri knew each other for a very long time. They both grew up in that community. Pansy took her laundry basket and all of her laundry to Dimitri's to do laundry. And then when she returned, that's when she noticed that Carlos was deceased. Investigator asked Pansy if you had to suspect someone of doing this to Carlos, Who would you suspect? Pansy said, Peter Johnson. She said that there had been a fight at the party the night before. Something about Peter using Carlos's car and not bringing the car back, and there was bad blood between the two of them. Before investigators tracked down Peter Johnson, they informed Pansy that she will have to remain at the county jail. She had some minor theft charges. At the time, she had an outstanding warrant. Investigators were eager to speak with Peter Johnson as well as the other partygoers. By the end of the day, on July 19th, investigators had several suspects. But also, at the end of the day, on July 19th, they had far more questions than answers. The following day, investigators received Carlos's autopsy. He died from blunt force trauma to the head. Carlos Jerrivont had a lot of trauma to the left side of his face. It also noted several small cuts. They were able to determine that when he was discovered at noon, he had been dead for quite a period of time. The pathologist stated that it was probably sometime between 4 and 8 o'clock in the morning. Pansy originally said that she had been at Carlos's house all night and that she left around 8 o'clock that morning to go to Dimitri Heathcote's to do some laundry. So investigators had to try to determine when Carlos was alive. With new insight into the crime's timeline, investigators next locate the man Pansy named in her statement, Peter Johnson. Investigators met with him in a parking lot of a furniture warehouse. He corroborated some of what Pansy said about the car. Carlos was mad that Peter wasn't bringing his car back, but it wasn't a big enough deal to involve violence. It was, hey, I want my car back. Peter Johnson admits to being at the party, but says he left sometime before midnight and never returned. He went to his girlfriend's residence. There were numerous people there. So there were other individuals that saw them there and confirmed that they had been there since around midnight the night before. Investigators begin moving through the list of partygoers, tracking them down one by one. According to everyone that knew Carlos, Carlos Jerrivont was a really nice guy, and they said that he would help anybody, he would do anything for anybody. They also learned that Carlos kept a unique weapon inside the trailer for protection. There were several different people that had told investigators that Carlos Jerrivont had a baseball bat. He had a bat wrapped in barbed wire. Carlos always had the bat at that house. Investigators now believe that bat to be the murder weapon. The small cuts on Carlos's face were probably caused by the barbed wire wrapped around the bat. However, the bat was not located at the crime scene. As authorities talk to the partygoers, they uncover a possible grudge against Carlos. They learn of a conflict between Carlos and a man at the party named Jeff Clawthorne. Jeff Clawthorne's trailer in Modesto had burned down at one point in time. Property that belonged to Jeff prior to the arson ended up in the possession of Carlos Jerrivont. Jeff Clawthorne believed that Carlos had burned his trailer. That was motive, but there was some time ago. And Jeff Clawthorne was also in that group that went to Carlos's house to frequent Carlos's residence. According to several guests, Jeff left the party in a huff and walked home. The partygoers alleged Jeff had assaulted another man previously with a weapon. That raises investigators' interest, and they started looking into it and found out that Jeff did hit someone with a baseball bat. So investigators thought it could have been Jeff Clawthorne. He had motive to kill Carlos if he thought Carlos Jerrivont was the one who burned his trailer down. Jeff Clawthorne is brought into the police station for questioning. He admits he did storm out of the party, but not because he was angry with Carlos. Jeff was mad at his girlfriend, and he left Carlos's trailer, and he started walking home, and then she picked him up, but they went back to Jeff Clawthorne's mother's trailer, and they had been there all night. Jeff claims that the following morning, he got up early and went to work. Carlos died early morning hours on the 19th, and according to Jeff, he had gone to work early morning hours of the 19th. When Jeff's interview is over, the first priority for investigators is verifying his alibi. Investigators went to his work, and they got information on when Jeff punched in. It wasn't until later on that morning, around 10 o'clock, that he went to work. So he was lying to investigators about that. Investigators tracked down Jeff's girlfriend. She confirms Jeff's story, saying she spent the night in question with him. But there is something else she is eager to share with detectives. She told investigators that Pansy was dating Dimitri Heathcote. Jeff's girlfriend says that for the last couple of years, Pansy switched back and forth between the two men. She lived with Dimitri for a period of time, and then she would move down to Carlos's. And Carlos and Dimitri knew. People that knew Carlos and people that knew Dimitri thought Pansy was manipulative. So whoever was nice to her or whoever had the drugs, that's where she gravitated towards. Investigators attempt to sort fact from fiction by collecting the cell phones of everyone in the friend circle who could be involved. All their cell phones were taken, got search warrants on all those phones, and then extracted all the information off the phones. The love triangle quickly takes center stage. Going through social media records from Dimitri Heathcote and Pansy Burrowes, they found that he had made comments that as long as Carlos is around, I'm never going to have you. When investigators read those Facebook messages, it's very clear to them that Dimitri wanted Pansy, and he didn't want to lose Pansy. And he was jealous of the love that she evidently, at that time, had for Carlos. Dimitri would have motive to kill Carlos because if Carlos is out of the picture, then he can have Pansy, which is what he wanted. As Dimitri Heathcote moves to the top of the suspect list, Jeff Clawthorne falls off. The locations data that investigators were able to get from cell phones was proof that Jeff Clawthorne was not at Carlos's location at the time of the homicide. But Carlos Jerrivont's phone reveals more than just that. There was a text sent from his phone at 4:12 a.m. using a derogatory name for Pansy, saying that she was still at Dimitri Heathcote's place. So Carlos was clearly mad at that point that Pansy was still at Dimitri's. So investigators knew then that Pansy wasn't at Carlos's like she said she was. Pansy says that she left about 8 o'clock that morning to go do laundry. Clearly, she was lying. After realizing Pansy wasn't being entirely honest, detectives meet with her on July 28th at the county jail, where she remains in custody on the outstanding warrants. Pansy admits to the love triangle. Pansy said she started seeing both of them. If she wasn't with one of them, she was with the other. They knew it. But Pansy ended up choosing Carlos. Pansy finally told Dimitri. According to Pansy, Dimitri wasn't happy about that. It drove him crazy. Pansy said that Dimitri never talked about doing harm to Carlos. Dimitri would just make comments like, if it weren't for Carlos, I would be with you. I would have you. Investigators confront Pansy about the text found on Carlos's phone. It clearly indicates that you are not being honest. At 4:12 in the morning, Carlos says, the effing bleep is still at Dimitri's. Detectives suspect Pansy of protecting Dimitri. Pansy thought investigators were after Dimitri, not her. Pansy denies trying to protect Dimitri. After getting nowhere with Pansy, investigators bring Dimitri Heathcote into the station to try their luck with him. Dimitri Heathcote told investigators that he loves Pansy. He said he knew Pansy wasn't good for him, but he can't help himself. Investigators asked Dimitri, would you do anything for her? Dimitri said no. Dimitri Heathcote's account of where he was at that night is he's at his house. He doesn't leave. He didn't go anywhere. With Pansy and Dimitri sticking by their stories, investigators get creative. Investigators looked for surveillance cameras around and along Carlos and Dimitri's residences. To travel from Dimitri's house to Carlos's would require driving past a school. The school had cameras. Investigators were able to get all of the footage from the school. They found the footage from the early morning hours of July 19th. They see Dimitri Heathcote car at about 4:13 going past the school. At his interviews, Dimitri said he was staying home all night and that nobody had taken his car. Why is his car going past the school if it didn't leave his house all night? That's not all the footage has to offer. Investigators are able to see that there are 2 people in the car, but they can't see who they are. If Dimitri is the killer, it appears he had an accomplice. So investigators are going to try to talk to Dimitri and give him an opportunity one more time to tell the truth. That someone else was involved in the homicide. Months after the murder of Carlos Jerrivont, Pansy Burrowes has been released from jail, where she had been held on unrelated outstanding warrants. With a potential murder suspect in the community, investigators waste no time, and on May 24, 2018, they speak with Dimitri again. At this time, Dimitri is in jail in Florida, where he is being held on narcotics charges. Investigators had the murder box with them. A murder box is a box of everything investigators had collected. Investigators confronted Dimitri Heathcote with different pieces of evidence. But at that time, investigators wanted him to also know that they believed there was another player that helped him out. Dimitri said Pansy deserves to be locked up because she is the mastermind behind it all. She is a conniving, evil person. Dimitri says that in the early morning hours of July 19th, after the party at Carlos's place, Pansy showed up at his house. He said that Pansy was telling him that Carlos beats her. She showed him the bruises. So they decided to go confront Carlos Jerrivont about the abuse. According to Dimitri, he and Pansy went in his car. They arrive at the mobile home, and Dimitri remains outside while Pansy allegedly walks in without Dimitri. Dimitri waits a few minutes and then enters the trailer. Dimitri said, "Carlos, come at me." He grabs that bat, come at me with it. He swung and missed, and I took it from him. I hit him in the head. I swung one time. Pansy was still in the house. Dimitri said that after he hit Carlos, he fell unconscious, but he was still alive. Pansy and Dimitri get into the car. Pansy's driving the car, and they leave. Dimitri said Pansy put him up to going to Carlos's place to confront him about beating on her. Dimitri now realizes Pansy was making it up. She bruises easily. Pansy is the mastermind. Dimitri said he wouldn't have done this without her. The Facebook records and the phone records, they all indicated a lot of manipulation on Pansy's part. She was playing the two men against each other. Pansy would make accusations against Carlos to Dimitri, and she would make accusations against Dimitri to Carlos. She would get them to feel sorry for her, and she would just use that to her advantage. What doesn't match is what Dimitri says happened inside the home. It was certainly multiple blows. That was clear. There was nothing about the crime scene evidence that was consistent with the story that Dimitri Heathcote had given. Investigators know they don't have the whole story. 5 days later, Dimitri reaches out. This time he says he is ready to tell them everything. Dimitri said he had been talking to his cellmate. His cellmate told him to tell the truth. He said, "If you don't, you're going to go to jail for something you didn't do." Dimitri said to investigators, Pansy Burrowes is the one that killed Carlos Jerrivont. Dimitri said, "I hit him in the head. I know that it knocked him out. He was out, but I know that he was still alive when Pansy picked up the bat. I watched her strike Carlos Jerrivont as I was walking out of that house. I heard her strike him 2 more times before I walked out that day." Dimitri said that he and Pansy went to Carlos's house to confront him, talk to him about him beating on Pansy. But Pansy took it too far. She just too effed up on the drugs, and the drugs had taken her over. At that point, Dimitri Heathcote was arrested for the murder, and investigators opted to go and file for a warrant for the arrest of Pansy. Investigators learned that after Pansy's release from jail earlier in the year, she quickly married an old high school friend, Carlos Burrowes. But Pansy's attempt at domestic life comes to an end on June 11, 2018, when deputies arrive at her home with an arrest warrant. Pansy and Carlos Burrowes were asleep. The next thing they know, 3 or 4 officers standing around their bed, screaming with guns drawn, telling them to get up, show your hands. They handcuffed Pansy and put her in the car. They were arresting her for murder. Pansy was not upset. There was no, "I didn't do it." All she did was just stand up, put her arms behind her back, and said, "Okay," and never said another word to arresting officers. Once authorities arrested Pansy Burrowes and Dimitri Heathcote for the beating death of Carlos Jerrivont, prosecutors prepare for trial. It becomes apparent that drugs fueled this love triangle turned deadly. Prosecutor believed that Pansy didn't go to Carlos's house with the intentions of killing Carlos. All these emotions were fueled by drugs, and nobody was thinking clearly. It's hard to tell whether the first hit, when Dimitri swung the bat, killed Carlos, or if when Pansy steps up, grabs the baseball bat, strikes him 2 more times over the head, if that's what killed him. With one of Pansy's lovers dead, the other turns against her. Dimitri Heathcote didn't go to trial. Dimitri Heathcote pled guilty and took a reduced sentence in exchange for him testifying against Pansy. In September 2020, Pansy sees her day in court. The prosecution's case hinges on a star witness. Dimitri Heathcote testifies that Pansy urged him to confront Carlos Jerrivont. Pansy told Dimitri that she was getting beat up by Carlos, and he was going to go down there and confront him about it. Allegations of physical abuse, prosecutors argue, are unfounded. There was no evidence of physical abuse or any type of assault. There were never any police reports. There was nothing on social media. There was never anything where she was telling people that Carlos was beating on her. Other than Dimitri saying Pansy was there, the biggest piece of evidence that prosecutors had against Pansy was all the wildly inconsistent stories. There are thousands of pages of Facebook records and phone records. It was just a consistent pattern over several years' time of her manipulating both men to get whatever she wanted or needed at the time, whether that was food or drugs or a place to live. It was just the totality of everything. It wasn't any one particular piece of evidence. Everything pointed in the direction that Pansy was guilty. Pansy's defense points out that one crucial piece of evidence is missing. It was a big roadblock to prosecution that they never found the murder weapon. The defense argues that Dimitri Heathcote acted alone to eliminate a romantic rival, pointing out that his statement is all that places Pansy at the scene. The police clearly made a big deal out of the surveillance video. Without question, Dimitri is observed in the video. But at no time during July 19, 2017 was Pansy Burrowes observed in the surveillance video. They also note a problem with one important piece of Dimitri's statement. He basically said that Carlos was coming at him with a baseball bat, that he took the baseball bat away from Carlos. That was not consistent with the bloodstain pattern analysis. The blanket that was pulled down to the floor, the impact stains, which suggest that Carlos was under the covers when the beating occurred. And so how do you reconcile that with Dimitri's statement that he's standing up and he disarms him? They just don't add up. And so it begs the question, if Dimitri is lying about that, is he being truthful about Pansy being the person that inflicted the fatal blows? It's a purely circumstantial case. But the jury believes it is enough. They found Pansy guilty of murder, and they sentenced her to 60 years. They had Dimitri's word against hers. Pansy never thought in a million years that she would be sitting in prison for a murder charge. Dimitri Heathcote received 20 years in prison, followed by 5 years on home detention, and then 20 years on probation after that. Pansy continues to claim that she is innocent. She wants the truth to come out. She wants Carlos's mom to know that she didn't do it. Pansy Burrowes blames the drugs for her predicament. She got caught up in the drug life. She said that she wanted everything. Between the two men, they gave her everything she wanted. There is no denying the pain Carlos's family continues to suffer over the loss of a man they love. They said Carlos was a good guy. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't deserve to be beaten to death. In July 2021, Pansy Burrowes appealed her conviction in the California Court of Appeals. They upheld the conviction. She remains married to Carlos Burrowes. Dimitri Heathcote serves his 20-year sentence at Miami Correctional Facility. He will be eligible for parole on April 24, 2036. Thank you for being with me on this episode of Tom's True Crime. If you are interested in more in-depth investigations into the most perplexing crimes, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. What are your thoughts about this case? Please share them with us in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe.